All right, so for this game, there's a bunch of stuff going on here, but at its core, I guess to start, this is a sequencing setup, right? We have these 5 planes that are going to be taking off in sequence, so we can start with that. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. In addition to that, though, other things that we have to keep track of here. First of all, we know that the different planes have different, I guess, owners, the airlines, so we have to keep track of that. That is probably an easier thing. We can just use subscripts to keep track of that. We have P and Q, both of which are fly high, and then we have R, S, and T, all of which are getaway. Now, from there, apparently, as you get into the rules, you recognize that you also have to keep track of the types of flights. So some of them are international, and some of them are going to be domestic. Now, to keep track of that, what we can do is we can add a second tier to our board. So the idea is the plane with the airline would be one tier, and then the type of flight would be the other tier, the international or domestic. But essentially, we know that it's just that. We have domestic and we have international flights, no other types. From there, so the third rule is really the first functional rule. So plane P has an international flight. So I guess we can just say something like P, which we already know is fly high, is going to be international. Next, Q and R have to be domestics. So Q and R, which are F and G respectively, these guys are going to be domestic flights. Next, we are told that all international flights are before domestics. So that's actually, there's a lot going on there, right? Because if all of the internationals have to go before the domestics, and we know that this guy's international and these guys are domestics, then we can kind of put this together. We can say that P is going to have to go before both Q as well as R, because this guy's international and these guys are both domestics. Next, we are told that a getaway domestic has to go before F fly high domestics. And that actually goes even further now. I mean, first of all, because we know that we have an interrelationship between Q and R, but we can also kind of make a broader rule that I goes before all of the domestics, but then we can also say that the internationals are going to go before, I guess more specifically, the getaway domestics, which are going to themselves be before the fly high domestics. So that's a pretty nice kind of setup. And then when it comes to Q and R, we can now say that R, because it's a getaway domestic, is going to have to go itself before Q, which is going to be a fly high domestic flight. Now from there, I guess that's all the rules. What do we have left? Because these guys, we have a nice little sequence. We have S and T remaining, both of which are getaway. But here, I suppose we have a little bit more flexibility, don't we? Because S and T, either one or both, could still be international. And if they're international, they're going to go before the R, and then they'll go somewhere along with the P. But then again, wait, if they happen to be getaway, they'll be among the R, but they'll still be ahead of Q, won't they? Because, in fact, actually, I guess look at it this way. Q is a fly high domestic. And Q is the only fly high domestic because between the fly high planes, P we already know is international. And fly high domestics are kind of at the bottom of the ladder, aren't they? Because everybody is ahead of the fly high domestic. So Q arguably has to be last, no matter what. Whether S and T are getaway domestics or whether they're international, Q is still going to be after everybody else. So that's kind of a good start. So essentially, the only flexibility here are just S and T. And what we don't know is if they're international, is they'll go ahead of R for sure, along with the P. And if they're domestics, then they'll go somewhere between the P and the Q together with R. So let's go to the questions. Number 13, what could be the sequence of the 5 planes? Now, we don't have the types of flights here, but you know what? We've already figured out quite a bit with the PRQ kind of sequence. So let's use that to cut through some of the answers. So answer choice A, we have PQR, which doesn't work. Next, again, we have P and Q and then R's later. That doesn't work. C, again, we have PQR, which doesn't work. D, we have PRQ, so that's fine. And E, we have RPQ, that's definitely not going to work. So the best answer here is answer choice D, for question number 13. Next, question number, I guess 15 is our first local. So let's see what we can do with this. If S is at some point before P, now if S was before P, I suppose right away that tells us that S would have to be international in order to be able to go ahead of P. So both of these are now internationals, with this guy being a fly high and this getaway and then fly high. And then after P, as usual, we have to have R and then we have to have Q. And Q, of course, as usual, is going to be the last flight here. Can we do anything else? Now, in terms of T, I suppose we don't really know, because T could still be ahead of R and Q as long as T is international. Or T could be domestic and then it's going to be somewhere with the R, as we said before. So you know what? We have a little bit of flexibility. Let's see what we can do with what we have. The question asks, what must be false? A, S goes first, and I mean, seemingly it could. There doesn't seem to be any issue with that. B, S goes third, and oh no, that's definitely not going to happen because S is before all of these other planes, so there's no way for S to go third. The best answer for question number 15 is B. Next, question 16 is global. We'll come back to this one. Let's take a look at question number 17. If S goes third, now we didn't use this scenario, so let's use that. We can say if S is third, and of course all of this doesn't really apply anymore. What does that tell us? Obviously S is a getaway flight. Now we actually still don't really quite know whether this could arguably be international or domestic right now, can't it? Because if this was international, then you would simply have to have R as a domestic flight over here. In fact, we can actually say that number 4 has to be domestic, doesn't it? Because there's at least 2 domestics on the board. But that could work. You could have an international flight here. R and Q would both be domestics, and then all of these guys would be international, and that would be fine. Or not. You could have this guy be domestic as well, in which case, yeah, the internationals would go into 1 and 2 wherever, and then this would all work. So we have flexibility here. You know what? Let's see. Maybe we can make do with what we have. The question is, what cannot happen? Answer choice A. R is before S and T. So could we have R ahead of S and T? And maybe, because if we place an R over here and a T over there, as long as all of these are domestics, that's fine. You could have just the one international flight, which is P, and then RST would be kind of on the same level in 2, 3, and 4. That could be doable. Answer choice B. S is before Q and T. And same thing, actually. If we put a T over here, that could work, and then R could go over there. As long as these are all domestics, that's still viable. Answer choice C. S is before R and T. Oh yeah, no, that's definitely not going to work because we need a Q over here. There's no way to fit R and T after the S. So the best answer to question 17 is C. Next, let's go back to the globals. Question number 14. The plane that departs second could be any one of which, of how many rather. Now, obviously we know Q cannot go second, but outside of Q, I mean, in this last scenario that we did, we kind of said that R, S, and T could have shuffled between 2, 3, and 4, and as long as they were all domestics, they would have been on the same level. Now, yes, we had S locked into 3, but that's just incidental. If we had R, S, T in 3, 2, 3, and 4, and they were all domestics, then they could go really in any sequence. So it seems like R, S, and T easily could have gone second. And then P, yeah, why couldn't P go second? If you place, even in this scenario, P into this position, then you could have T be an international flight in this position. In fact, it would be really this scenario that we had whereby P could have gone second. So that also could have happened. So really almost anybody can go second. It's just Q who could not. The best answer to question number 14 is there are 4 planes who can go second. Lastly, question number 16. Which of the following must be true? Answer choice A, P goes first, and I don't think we know that because, I mean, there's flexibility. In fact, in this one scenario that we had again, P didn't have to go first. Q goes last, and yes, that we definitely know that Q had to go last. Best answer to question number 16 is B.